I'm testing this to see if I can get my phone to stay in that position while I do my post-lunch walk on the treadmill and record a video, because I want to talk about a very relevant, very important distinction that if you miss this, I've seen some people throw GNM, the baby, out with the bathwater because they don't understand this very important piece of the GNM framework. And that is this. So, an upsetting event does not necessarily activate a DHS, a biological adaptation program, psyche brain organ, where you'll see an impact in the brain, adaptations on the organ level, which lead to physical symptoms, in some cases a diagnosis of a disease or a sickness. An upsetting event can just be an upsetting event. An upsetting event can be something that was annoying, frustrating, a hard thing that you had to deal with, but in order for it to be a DHS that activates a biological special program and leads to tissue adaptations in the body, there have to be 3 specific criteria that are met. And those 3 criteria are, it has to be unexpected. Things that you can anticipate, things that you knew, oh God, I got this coming up. If you can expect it, it's not unexpected. If you have anticipated it, it's not catching you on the wrong foot. The thing about a DHS is it's something you were completely unprepared for. It caught you on the wrong foot, and it was shocking. It was shocking. It was important to you. It was relevant for you. It was acute. It was dramatic. It was like in that moment, it was a big deal. Now, something being a big deal can be a realization. It doesn't have to be like a humongous car crash. It can be a devastating realization. That can be acute and a big deal and dramatic for you in a moment. Unexpected, wow, I didn't expect to realize that I'm incapable. I didn't expect to, wow, realize that you think I'm an idiot. Wow, that was really shocking. And then the third thing is that it's isolating. In that moment, you feel totally alone, on the spot, dealing with this thing. And so when those 3 criteria are met, that is what activates the biological special program. It's the trifecta of those 3 elements of the experience striking the psyche in a moment where the subconscious mind says, she can't deal with this on her own. We need to adapt these physical tissues in the body in order to help her to survive, to get through this thing. And so depending on the content of what it was that happened, if it was a self-devaluation, it's going to affect the connective tissue. If it was a, I can't swallow this conflict, it's going to affect the throat. If it's a, this stinks, I'm so annoyed, it's going to affect the sinuses. If it was the, I cannot digest that this happened, I'm angry, I feel deprived, it's going to affect the small intestine. So depending on exactly what happened, that's what determines which biological adaptation program is activated. But it's not just annoying things. It's not just, life events that don't go your way. That does not necessarily constitute a conflict shock. Now, a good example of how that works even is to think about like the Control-Alt-Delete on the Microsoft system. When you press that panel would pop up where you could, shut the computer down, restart, quit certain applications. It was a very useful, when you press those 3 buttons at the same time, that's the only time that panel would pop up. Same thing with the biological program. You can press the delete button all day long on Microsoft computers, and it's not going to pull up the panel unless you have all 3. And so that's how you can look at stuff happening, upsetting events, things that are negative, things that are less than ideal, that are not activating a biological special program. Now, sometimes you'll say, well, I had a big symptom, but a big thing didn't happen, and it didn't meet all 3 of those criteria, but I had the symptom anyways. In that case, what you experienced is a conflict track. So at some point in your personal history, you did have a conflict shock. And a conflict shock, there's like this BCAD situation. There's before conflict, where you had never had this identity conflict, this self-devaluation, this feeling attack, nothing like that had ever happened to you before. And then there's the AD, that's after the DHS. After the thing happens, now I'm seeing the world through a different lens. Now my psyche is on the lookout for similar events. And so this is where you can experience something that, again, doesn't feel like that big of a deal. It doesn't feel like a big, isolating, shocking, caught you on the wrong foot conflict that like started the whole thing off. But it is just, it's a track. It's a reminder. Your body, you did have that at one point, right? It could have been when you were 6 years old and you were in first grade or kindergarten and, you got made fun of and you had this intellectual self-devaluation conflict. And so now every time you question your intelligence, you get on the track for the intellectual self-devaluation conflict, and then when you get off it, you have neck pain. And so it's not that you had a brand new shock every single time. You can have new conflict shocks that can happen, but often what you're dealing with is a conflict track, something that happened before, something that is reminding you. So it could be a person, a place, a thought, an experience, a feeling, and then that will reactivate the tissue adaptation. And when you get off the track, you get away from the stimulus, get away from that reminder, then you resolve it, you come into healing, which means you have symptoms. And so, yes, I thought that this was a very important thing to unpack because, yeah, I heard someone recently say, well, this whole thing about trauma and conflicts causing symptoms, well, that just can't be because, people would be sick all the time. And they didn't know how to define how GNM defines a conflict shock, defines trauma, because it's very nebulous in general, and everybody talks about trauma all the time. But a conflict shock, a DHS, which the DHS stands for Dirkhammer syndrome. And Dirkhammer was Dr. Hammer's 17-year-old son who was unexpectedly shot while sleeping on a boat and airlifted to the hospital and had to have his leg amputated and ended up dying after a few months. Really, the hospital killed him, but that's a separate story. So that was Dr. Hammer's shocking event that led to him developing a testicular adaptation or testicular cancer, which is why we know about the 5 biological laws and are able to navigate life with this really incredible map. But if you mistake the definition of a conflict shock and think it's just general trauma, you think that every upsetting event, that GNM saying that every upsetting event can cause sickness and disease, you're missing the point. You're missing specific criteria. So I really hope that people will actually study the 5 biological laws, observe them. You will see them for yourself. They are empirically verified. You see it again and again and again. And that's where it's no longer just this idea or this theory. This is biological law. It's just as obvious as the 4 seasons. It's as obvious, as the day-night cycle. You see, this is biology and this is how it works.